Hi, thanks for joining me here on Facebook Live. I'm Dr. Alexis Conason, and I am so excited to be talking today about a topic that I think is really interesting, and it's a passion of mine. So I'm excited to share it here with you. But just to introduce myself, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Dr. Alexis Conason. I'm a clinical psychologist and I'm in private practice here in New York City. And I'm also the founder of the Anti-Diet Plan. The Anti-Diet Plan is a mindfulness-based program to help you stop dieting and start eating in attunement with your body in ways that feel more joyful, peaceful, and pleasurable. So I have some really big news about the Anti-Diet Plan that's going to be revealed tomorrow by email. So I hope everyone here is already registered for my email list. But if you're not, please sign up. You can do so at my website, www.drconason.com, and you won't miss out on any of the big news that I'm going to be sharing tomorrow about my program, the Anti-Diet Plan. All right, so let's jump in. I have this poll, so if you're joining me here live, I would love if you say hello. You can send likes or let me know where you're watching from in the comments section. I'd love to get to know you guys a little bit more, and one of the ways I would like to do that is through the poll. So this is a new feature that Facebook has set up, at least it seems new to me, I don't know. And hi Judy, thanks for joining me. And I would love to know, because today we're going to be talking all about groups and group therapy and group coaching. And I want to know, have you ever done a group, and would you join a therapy group? So you can let me know by answering that poll if you would join a therapy group. You could either answer, heck no, not for me, or we could, or say yes, like can't wait to join. And I'd also be curious if you've ever done a therapy group and what your experience has been like. I have, I think, always run groups in my practice because I think that groups are a really meaningful way for people to connect and create changes in long-term patterns in their life. So individual therapy is really wonderful too. That's the bulk of how I spend my days is doing individual work with clients one-on-one. But there's something that happens in a group setting that it's really hard to explain or describe, but it is some powerful stuff. And that's one of the reasons I really like doing groups, is because I can work one-on-one with people for, a certain amount of time, and sometimes there's something about being in the group that really creates a change in someone. So, I could be saying we're working on the same things in individual therapy, and they get into the group and somebody maybe says something, one of the other group participants says something that makes them hear things in a little bit of a different way, or it just clicks, or they hear someone else going through a similar experience to what they're going through, and it's like a light bulb goes off. And it doesn't matter that I've essentially been saying the same thing in our one-on-one sessions for years or months. They just needed that moment to hear it from somebody else. And there's something that's really not, I think we can't recreate that in any other setting other than actually coming and connecting with other people. So Judy said that she's never done a group, but she would love to try one. So maybe there's other people in that boat too. Like, you haven't had the opportunity to join a group, or you haven't found the right fit yet, or you don't even know where to look for a group in your area, and but you're interested. And I have to say, group therapy, I think not only do we learn a lot about how to cope with the struggles that we're going through and how to heal from different kinds of issues, but we also learn a lot about ourselves in the way that we relate with others, and the ways that we relate with ourselves, and the impact that we can have on other people. I think that's another aspect of group that's often minimized, but really powerful when it happens. We come in looking for treatment for ourselves and wanting to get help with our own issues, but the experience of helping somebody else through their struggles is really a transformative experience in and of itself. So those are some of the reasons, and I can talk more about why I think that groups are, one of my favorite forms of therapy, one of my favorite forms of treatment. And it's not just therapy, because we're seeing more and more group coaching going on, and this is really an interesting evolving field. So a lot of online groups are coming on, and I'm going to be having my first online group with the Anti-Diet Plan online program that I'm going to be sharing the news about tomorrow. And this is going to be my first venture into, outside of group therapy, which I usually do, in my office, to moving towards more of a coaching model, which is more focused on wellness and helping people really thrive in their lives. So I'm excited about that, and it will be really interesting to see how that evolves. But one of the things that I usually come across, and one of the reasons I really want to talk to you all today about groups and group therapy and group coaching, is that usually when I mention the idea of doing a group to someone, they, unlike Judy, who's interested in trying a group, they kind of, they don't want to do it. Most people, when I say that I have a group and that I think it would be beneficial for them, they're like, okay, thanks, but no. Thanks, but no thanks. Like, I don't really want to sit in a room full of other people and talk about my problems. And we talk more about what their concerns are and what the group is actually like versus what their conceptions of what a group will be like. And most often they end up doing the group and usually get a tremendous amount of value out of it. And I think it's so funny because I end up doing groups with a whole room full of people who really don't want to be in a group. I'd say 9 out of 10 of the participants in my groups identify as not a group person. That's the first thing that they say. They say, I don't like groups. I don't do well in groups. I don't really want to be a part of a group. So it's a whole room full of people who don't really want to be a part of a group. And these groups, seeing the ways that people connect in these groups and the relationships that are formed and the healing that takes place, really enabled by the different group members, it just blows my mind that these are people who said they didn't even want to be in a group in the first place. And here they are, supporting each other and getting so much out of the group experience. So I sat down and I thought about what really stops people from doing a group. Like, what are the main obstacles, hesitations, and concerns? And what I came up with were 3 reasons that I think that people most commonly shy away from doing a group. And I want to go through these with you because I really don't think that any of them are a great reason not to do the group. And there's so many wonderful benefits. So one of the most common things that I hear about not wanting to do a group is that they don't want to talk about their own problems with other people. So it takes a lot for people to come into therapy. For someone to get from, a moment of struggling or even looking online at different therapists to actually show up in my office and come in for that first session, there's a tremendous amount of courage and strength and bravery that goes on in that process to show up in a therapist's office and talk to a virtual stranger about your innermost issues. And we tend to have a lot of shame around our problems. I think that we live in a culture that largely teaches us that being emotionally vulnerable or emotionally open is a bad thing, that it's like a sign of weakness, and that we have to kind of just swallow our feelings and pretend that everything's okay and put on a happy face and take care of everyone else in the world, and we can't really talk about what's going on for us. So it's hard enough to be able to overcome that and just talk to your therapist about what the problems are. Now we're talking about sitting in a whole room full of strangers, not just with one stranger talking about your problems, but with a whole room full of strangers. And the idea of opening up about your emotional issues with a room full of strangers is like, oh my gosh, are you kidding? So that, I think, is one of the most common hesitations that people have about group therapy, is like, I don't want to talk to these people about my problems. There's a lot of, like I said, shame, embarrassment, a feeling of wanting to keep your problems hidden and by yourself. And that can be really difficult because what ends up happening is that we get very isolated in our problems. So I have a lot of people who come in and they haven't shared with anybody what they're struggling with. They haven't told their partner, they haven't told their parents, they haven't told their best friend. Like nobody knows what they're struggling with. Now, I most commonly work with people who are struggling with different issues around overeating. And that, of course, is a particularly, shame-heavy topic, because our culture teaches us not only that we shouldn't be emotional, that we shouldn't have struggles, that we shouldn't talk about our problems, but that when it comes to issues around food and our body, that it should be simple, that all you have to do is eat less, move more, and you wouldn't be struggling with overeating if you had enough, willpower or discipline or motivation. So those things are completely not true, and it ends up with people really blaming themselves for struggling with overeating and body image issues, and it makes them, it makes the process of seeking help even more difficult. Most people who seek help, by the way, just as a side note, because I think this is interesting, most people who seek help for overeating don't show up in my office. They don't show up in a therapist's office, and often they don't even show up in a dietitian's office. They will show up at a diet plan, like Weight Watchers or any of the other diet plans out there, sometimes medical weight loss programs, or their primary care physicians, and say, I can't lose weight, I don't know what the problem is. So we tend to see it as a physical problem, when in reality it's really not just about the food, and it's not, there's a huge emotional component. But anyway, that's a side note, but I think it's really interesting that to even come to a place of acknowledging that the overeating is an emotional struggle, and to openly share it, not just about, trying to lose weight, which I think is much more kind of acceptable to talk about in our culture, but to get into the deeper, what it's like to eat in ways that feel out of control, what it's like to eat for emotional reasons, what it's like to hate your body every day. Those are things we really don't talk about. So I have like a double obstacle when I'm trying to, encourage people to join my groups, in that we are both, trying to get over the general kind of prohibition against talking about your emotions with other people that our culture has. Plus, there's an added layer of shame that comes around with overeating because of our culture's kind of mythology around personal responsibility, and that if you overeat, it means that you're weak, or you're not motivated, you're not trying hard enough. So there's a lot of obstacles. But the key thing to hold on to here is that sometimes we do things that are uncomfortable for us. So yes, joining a therapy group and the idea of talking to other people about your issues around food might feel overwhelming. It might feel scary. It definitely might feel uncomfortable. And we can do it anyway. And we can push ourselves outside of our comfort zone in a way that feels manageable, with the support of the therapist, of course. And kind of step outside, push our boundaries a little bit, step outside of our comfort zone to experience something that might ultimately be incredibly freeing and healing and a transformative experience. I really think that groups tend to be very transformative for people, and we're able to make progress, like I said, in ways that we just don't always in individual work. So in terms of, feeling uncomfortable about talking about your problems in a group, my advice would kind of be like, yeah, it's uncomfortable, but maybe it's worthwhile doing anyway. I think that things can be uncomfortable, and we can still leap in and do it, even though it's scary and feels uncomfortable, because I think the reward, the payoff, is really big in terms of being able to find peace and healing from these struggles with food that we've been dealing with for so many decades of our lives. Most people, have been struggling with this for a while. Another reason that a lot of people say they don't want to do a group is that they don't want to hear other people's problems. I think it's funny because actually the process of hearing other people's struggles tends to help us resolve our own struggles, because sometimes we, like I said, kind of hear it in a different light. But this is a really common one that people have. And I think that we tend to have a misperception about what therapy groups really are, and a lot of that comes from the media. So if anybody, has anybody ever watched like a TV show or a movie where they talk about a therapy group and or where they show a therapy group and it's like a group of really pathetic seeming, sad seeming people sitting around in these dingy, folding chairs like in the basement of some building somewhere with like no windows and no light and just kind of droning on and on about their problems. So a lot of us think that that's what group therapy is, and it couldn't be further from the truth. So group therapy or group coaching is a process where the group leader, if they are skilled, and hopefully they are, and have experience doing groups, is able to really mediate and shape the discussion so that it's a productive, engaging, dynamic session. So the idea is not just to have people whining and complaining about all of their problems, but rather to work collectively as a group towards a shared common goal, which is usually coping and healing from whatever it is that the group is dealing with. And often groups do center around, one issue. So you might go to a group where everybody's struggling with grief, for example, or recovering from substance abuse, or like the groups that I run where people are all trying to heal from overeating and to improve their relationship with food. So to use my group as an example, like we're all working together on this common goal, the common mission of really dramatically changing our relationship with food. And there's something that feels very motivating about that shared experience, that it's a collective experience, like we're all in it together, trying to overcome a common challenge, a shared challenge. But a good group leader should be able to mediate the discussion so that no one person kind of drones on and on and on in a group. And also they should be able to mediate the discussion so that the conversation stays forward moving and productive. Now, there's a lot of different types of groups that you can join. There's process groups, which are a little bit less structured. There's support groups, which are also a little bit less structured. There's psychoeducational groups. There's mindfulness-based groups, there's coaching groups, there's just a ton of different things. I don't want to go into all the different types of groups today because that could be like a whole other section of this talk. But you can think about what kind of group you like. But for example, the groups that I run are, I really describe them as more of like a workshop or a class. So there's psychoeducation, which means that we actually are like learning new tools and techniques. We're learning new stuff every week. And I do have kind of a game plan. So I try to keep the group to that agenda that I have. Now, of course, I do allow time for discussion because I think that sharing and the conversation is really like one of the most powerful parts of groups. It's nothing, I don't think there's anything so magical about what I'm saying or doing. It's really the experiences that people get from the other group members that tends to be transformative. So I leave lots of time for us to talk, but in a very structured way. People aren't just talking about the problems that they're having at work or the problems that they're having with their family. That, I think, is where individual therapy is most appropriate for. The groups are structured around, my groups are around, our relationship with food and the content that we're learning about in each class. So if you're worried about doing a therapy group or a coaching group because you don't want to listen to people drone on and on about their problems, please be assured that the group leader will hopefully do whatever they can do to avoid that from happening and try to mediate and keep the group on task. And then the other concern that I think a lot of people have about joining a therapy group or coaching group is that they don't have the time. And I hear this a lot. So I have to commit to being here at the same time every week. Like that feels like a lot. And I think with the way that our culture is kind of moving towards, we're having less and less of those set live, person-to-person commitments to each other. And That's fine. I think it's great. I'm a big fan of technology, and as I said, I'm using this technology myself, and I'm going to be doing my group online now, so I'm not complaining about the technology. But I do think that there's something about showing up live with another human being and making that connection that is, there's just no technology that can replace that. So as much as technology has advanced in recent years, the need for human connection hasn't changed. So whether we're connecting with other people through a group, like a Skype group or Zoom or something like that online, where there's not where people aren't physically in the same place together, or whether it's a physical group where we're showing up at a set place and all sitting in a room together, there's something really irreplaceable about that human connection. I just don't think that can be replicated at this point, at least with email or other kinds of asynchronous communication. I don't even think that we can really replicate that in just like pre-recorded type of things, even something like this Facebook Live. I have some interaction with you guys, but it's still pretty much just me here talking, and you can't see each other, you can't really talk to each other. So this technology is wonderful, and I think there's a time and place for it, but I do think that there's something about interacting with the other people who are struggling with the same thing that is really kind of the key piece to change. And the way that you do connect with other people is by making a commitment in time to show up at a set time and set place for yourself and for the group. So that's a really important thing to consider, that when you join a therapy group, you are committing to, like I said, you're committing to yourself and you're committing to the other group members that you're going to show up as much as you can at that set time and place. But to address the issue that people don't have enough time, I really question this, because I get it. I get that everyone's really busy. Like, I'm busy too. It's hard for me to find the time to commit to doing things. But when we look at what we're really spending our time doing, I do wonder if there's ways to prioritize our time so that we can create the space for ourselves for healing. For example, I recently read a statistic that the average person spends 2 hours every single day on social media. I'm glad. I hope this is, half an hour of those 2 hours that you're spending with me. But that's a lot of time that we're spending on social media. So the question is, how can we reorganize our time to try to prioritize our own well-being and our own mental health and wellness? And the other thing that I think is interesting is that when we think about how much emotional time and space our struggles with food take up in our mind, right? So many people spend most of their day thinking about food, thinking about not feeling good about their body, and it really it's hugely consuming and preoccupying. And when we think about, can we create an hour in our week to, show up, same time, same place, to really change that? I think that that's an investment in time that's really well spent. Now, I might be biased, but I do think that, investing in our emotional wellness is one of the best investments that we can make. So those are the top 3 reasons that I think that people tend to be kind of hesitant or resistant to doing a therapy group. And I hope that you won't let any of those 3 things stop you, because I'm telling you, participating in a group can be one of the most transformative and meaningful experiences. You will learn so much about yourself. You will learn so much about other people struggling with similar issues and how they cope with things and how you interact in a group. And I just think there's such tremendous benefit. There was some research done that was stated in an article published by the American Psychological Association that actually found that groups are just as effective as individual therapy. Now, I think the gold standard, if you can swing it, is to do both individual and group, but it's pretty impressive that groups are, some of the groups are found to be just as effective as individual work. So it's a highly effective form of treatment. They found that in their research, some of the things that were healing were the human, element of the group. So things like forming, strengthening social networks, decreasing shame, stigma, isolation, and hearing things from your peers rather than from a professional. Those were all things that were really powerful predictors of change in the therapy groups. So I think they're really transformative. They also tend to be more affordable than individual work. So if you're struggling financially and you're looking for a way to get help and get treatment, groups are really a wonderful option. And like I said, I'm just a huge fan of groups. I've been running them for most of my career. And I think they're just a really incredible way of treatment. I have seen people make such dramatic, I don't want to say dramatic, but really meaningful and long-lasting changes in the groups. And sometimes people that I work with in individual work, and I see the way that they're able to, just kind of process things differently in the group setting, and it's just wonderful to see. So I hope that I have convinced you to check out a therapy group or a coaching group and kind of dive into what that experience is. I think it is one that you won't regret. It's really valuable in my opinion. And make sure that you stay tuned on my email list, because like I said, I'm going to be sharing some really big, really exciting news tomorrow about my group program, the Anti-Diet Plan. That's going to be my first venture outside of my therapy office and into the world of online online groups and online courses, and just bringing this whole thing virtual. I think that's where the technology is going. I think the technology is there. There's no reason to keep this to myself and the few people who are local to me who can fit into my office. So I'm really excited about this, and I just can't wait to share this news with you tomorrow. So if you're not already on my email list, you can sign up on my website, drconneson.com. If you have any questions about the Anti-Diet Plan, feel free to email me. I'd be happy to tell you more one-on-one about the program. I'm also going to be opening things up to chat individually with people who are interested in joining the program. So, I can tell you more about the program and tell you if I think it would be a good fit for you, because I want to make sure that the program is a good fit. I don't want just anybody to sign up. I want people who really are going to be the best match, and that the program will be the best match for them. So if you're interested in that, feel free to email me. You can do that at info@drconneson.com. And you can also find me on social media, Instagram at the Anti-Diet Plan, Twitter at Conneson Psy.D, and right here on Facebook. So thank you all for joining me as we talk about groups and group therapy and group coaching. And I'm so excited to share my news with you tomorrow. I hope that you will be on the lookout for that email that'll come through tomorrow. And I'll see you next week. Thanks for joining me. Take care.